We're now live. So I'm Dr. Mark Heisig, going to be chatting about concussions and hockey today. So hockey is near and dear to my heart. I started playing when I started a little bit late compared to other people, but I started playing when I was like 8, 9 years old, and played all the way through college. Some of my best friends to this day are from the locker room, and from my days playing. So I love the sport. So today I want to talk about some hockey-specific stats, maybe make the game less scary than people think it is, but also give you kind of just the straight-up facts about it. And then for players, parents, coaches, I want to talk about what a concussion looks like, and then what should we do to return to play? Because I see hockey players, and I see what they've been told and what they are told, and I kind of want to give you my take on that, on what should be done after we have a concussion or we suspect a concussion. So again, some background on me, like why should I be talking about hockey? I took some notes on myself, humble brags here, but I was, in the grand scheme of things, I was very mediocre across the board in hockey. So I played from 99 to 2012. I finished in the ACHA with NAU back in Flagstaff, and I've been intermittently in beer leagues ever since. I think we actually, April 6th, I think we won, me and my buddies in high school won a state championship today back in 2008. And so I was a center. I was a small guy. I was a center. I played a two-way game. I played very aggressively. I really admired Peter Forsberg growing up. I liked his aggressive style of play, so I wanted to play aggressively. And being that, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm 5'7", 5'8" on a good day. So I was subject to a lot of players much larger than myself very often. So in high school, I was ragdolled at least once a game. There's at least one hit every game where everyone on my team, the coaches, like everyone would be like, holy crap, is he going to get up? And I got up just fine. Like I would get smoked and then I would pop back up. But I know that was probably not good for me. And then in college, I was much stronger. I was about 30 pounds heavier. From the time I started high school to the time I was playing in college, I was about 30 pounds heavier, but not much taller. And so there were two hits in college that retrospectively my coaches and teammates, everyone should have been like, oh, shit. We should not let him get back on the ice and play, and we should scratch him and evaluate him for the weekend, at least at a minimum. But I didn't. And so I dealt with problems after those two hits, and now we're here today, and I'm trying to help people avoid that themselves. So in terms of concussion and hockey and like hockey specific statistics, how often do hockey players sustain concussion compared to other sports? Say like the big ones that are compared are kind of like football is thought of for concussion, hockey is thought of for concussion, rugby, lacrosse, mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts takes the cake. I think it's like 1 in every 15 events or something like that. It might not be that much, but it's high. It's insane. So rugby takes the cake. But in terms of team sports, we look a lot at hockey, football, rugby, lacrosse, soccer gets thrown in there. So when we break it up in terms of youth versus adults, youth ice hockey, they don't really differentiate boys versus girls, youth ice hockey. But in terms of just youth ice hockey, we measure the frequency of concussion in terms of athlete exposures. So every time every time an athlete steps on the ice, it's an athlete exposure. So if there's a team of 20 players, if those 20 players step on the ice, that's 20 athlete exposures. So in one game, you might have 30, 40 athlete exposures. So over time, you can see how 1,000 athlete exposures would add up. So we measure concussion in terms of 1,000 per 1,000 athlete exposures. So in youth ice hockey, per 1,000 athlete exposures, we see about 1.2 concussions. So for every 1,000 players that step on the ice, 1.2 of them is going to sustain a concussion. That happens behind rugby at about 4.8 or 4.8, 4.1, 4.2 concussions per 1,000 athlete exposures. So in youth sports, the number one youth sport for concussion in terms of team sports is rugby, and then it's hockey. But there's a difference of like 4 to 1 in terms of concussions. Then when we get into adult women's ice hockey actually has more concussions than men's ice hockey. So women, in terms of 1,000 athlete exposures, again, 2 teams step on the ice, you're looking at 30 to 40 athlete exposures per game. Women's ice hockey has around 2.2, 2.3 concussions per 1,000 athlete exposures. And that actually comes just behind rugby, men's football, women's ice hockey. Just behind women's ice hockey, we have men's ice hockey at about 1.6 per 1,000 athlete exposures. So again, men's ice hockey actually falls behind rugby, men's football, women's ice hockey, then it's men's ice hockey. So typically in the youth arenas, we see more concussions in hockey than we do in football. In the adult arenas, we see fewer concussions in hockey than in football. And in all arenas, rugby tends to be worse than hockey. So just in the grand scheme of things, that's kind of what's going on in hockey. The fact that I had 2 concussions per one, if men's ice hockey, like adult ice hockey, 1.62 per 1,000 athlete exposures. The reason that I probably sustained 2 concussions in that one season is probably because I didn't get accurate diagnosis and care and management after that initial hit. So when we look at when you get the NCAA CARE Consortium and the CARE study, like the big studies using the NCAA and military data, you'll see that repeat concussions are far more likely within the same season from the same player when early return happens, when poor management happens. We'll see back in the 90s, I think the first concussion after the second concussion after the first one. So the first repeat concussion, I think it happened within like 2 weeks. It was something insane. It was like, you got hit. The second concussion later on with better care often takes much more time, which means you're much more likely to recover and metabolically be okay to sustain that hit. So grand scheme of things, concussion stats in hockey is a lot less frequent than people would realize. In the youth arenas, it's behind football. In the adult arenas, it's behind rugby and football. So moving on, what does a concussion look like? So generally speaking, I talked about this with the Patrick Mahomes hit. I talked about this in several videos, but we'll go through again. There's 7 signs kind of in the research that we look at when we're like sideline evaluating a concussion. Lying motionless, like losing consciousness, is a good indication that a concussion happened. More than 90% of concussions don't have a loss of consciousness. Less than 10% do, but if you got knocked unconscious, it's likely that you sustained a concussion. So lying motionless, having posturing, that fencing posturing, decorticate or decerebrate posturing, this kind of flexor extensor, that's bad. We don't want to see that. Seizure-like activity, ataxia or staggering, so basically discoordination, funky movement. Shaking the head, having a bloody nose or a facial laceration is a good indication that you got hit hard enough to be evaluated. Having a blank or vacant stare, kind of like Patrick Mahomes had when he was just kind of staring off into the distance after he stumbled his way up. When we're looking in terms of hockey, the ones that the Banner Concussion Clinic here in the Valley listed for like the Arizona High School Hockey Association, having an appearance of being dazed or confused about their assignment or their position on the ice, forgetting their general plays, like not understanding a breakout, not understanding entry into the zone, different things like that, unsure of the game, the score, unsure of their opponent, if they're moving clumsily, answering questions slowly. Again, they note if you lose consciousness, even briefly, like sideline them, evaluate for concussion. If they're showing behavior or personality changes, that's a big one actually mentioned by the NCAA. Looking for personality changes. If nothing else shows, but that player is irritable or just personality is different, sideline them, evaluate for concussion. And they can't necessarily recall events prior to the hit, that post-traumatic amnesia, that's another sign of concussion. So on the sideline, some of the things that we could ask, Maddox questions, the things that Patrick Mahomes was probably asked, the things that we should have after my concussions in college. What's your name? What month is it? What day is it? Like, do you know which rink are we playing at? How far into the period is it? Which side, like who scored last? Which team did we play? Did we even win last week? Do you know where you're at in space? Those are good things to ask. So what do we do? we look for those signs. We basically say, did that look like a concussion? When we pull them to the side and we're asking these questions, do you know where you're at in space? If they're answering slowly, if the personality's changed, if the questions are getting answered wrong, we're going to pull them aside. We're going to evaluate them. So what do we do? Immediate removal from play. So when in doubt, sit out. When in doubt, sit out. Remove the gear, cool the body temperature, and perform a SCAT-5, focus neuro exam, baseline tests if you have them, a VOMS if you don't. Basically anything that's going to find a focal neural deficit, something that says, hey, something happened to the brain. You're looking for red flags, a reason to send to imaging to make sure that nothing more severe or different than a concussion happened. That's also going to have a significant problem in their return to play. And what's really, 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 really important is that you repeat that exam the very next day, because you don't want to see something slowly develop that gets missed because you didn't reevaluate it. In the meantime, you're going to watch for red flags. So if you're the parent or the coach or the trainer or the teammate or the sibling, you're going to watch for red flags. And these red flags are basically just signs that something more severe or different than a concussion has occurred that warrant an ER visit for imaging and management. You don't want there to be a brain bleed or swelling of the brain or a cervical injury that's going to cause muscle wasting or something bad that you just don't want to happen. So you're looking for basically neck pain or tenderness on the sideline. They're gonna image. If you're having double vision, if you're having weakness or burning or tingling in the extremities, severe or increasing headache. What's up, Calvin? Seizure-like activity, a loss of consciousness. Again, just get that image. Deteriorating condition. So when we talk about sleep, this is actually one that you do not need to not allow your athlete to sleep. So keep them up for at least 4 hours after the injury. But then after that, you're allowed to let them sleep. But you don't have to wake them, but it would behoove you to check on them. You want to make sure that respiration rate's not changing, that condition's not deteriorating, that they're doing okay throughout the night. But you don't need to wake them. Another sign for imaging that I have seen missed, I've seen it missed 4 times this year by patients that have come into my office. If you're vomiting after the incident, that's an indication for imaging. Your vomiting centers are in your brainstem. If you are just randomly vomiting after getting hit, it means your brainstem got shook, and you want imaging. Increased restlessness, agitation, personality changes. They're getting combative. They don't really recognize people or places. Those are all indications that, hey, this was gnarly and you should get some imaging. So that's kind of the acute stage. It's like, look for the sign of concussion. When in doubt, sit out. Perform a quick SCAT-5. This is more for the trainers and the coaches and docs. Perform the SCAT-5. Perform the neuro exam. If you don't have a baseline test, perform a VOMS. Do something that says, hey, can we safely allow this player to return, or do we need to start a concussion protocol and get them off the ice? No more. Say you've run through that and you find that it was a concussion. Like, say I got hit. My second hit that was bad. I was skating down to try to get a puck so that it wasn't an icing. And I was about the bottom of the circle when the defenseman cross-checked me, and I went Superman flying into the boards. And if it didn't have a cage on my helmet, like if I didn't require a cage in college, I would have hit the boards where the boards meet the glass right at my nose. And so hit the boards, went down. I blacked out for a few seconds, I'm assuming. I got up. Play was on the other end of the ice. I had no idea where it was at. I started skating to the wrong side of the rink to get back to the bench. Hopped on the bench. No one ran a SCAT-5. No one pulled me aside. My coach rubbed my shoulders, and I hopped on the ice the next shift. That's not okay. So what should have happened was SCAT-5, VOMS, baseline, something that would have said, hey, let's pull Mark aside. Let's not let him hop back on the ice. We should repeat an exam in 24 to 48 hours and then do something different. So let's say I got diagnosed with concussion. Let's say everything went right. Someone performed a VOMS. I got really dizzy on visual motion sensitivity, and they're like, hey, no, you're going to sit to the side. I should not have strict rest. I should not hibernate. I should not put on the sunglasses. I shouldn't avoid screens. I shouldn't avoid walking. I shouldn't avoid people, I should do symptom limited activity. I should avoid the screens if it flares my symptoms more than 2 points. I should avoid walking if it flares my symptoms more than 2 points, but I should not hermit. We need graded exposure to get back into the play or to get back into the world if you're not an athlete, but you're just trying to recover from concussion. So no more than 24 to 48 hours of strict rest. And by 72 hours, you should be introducing 45 minutes of schoolwork, 45 minutes of work, 45 minutes of whatever, to try to get back into the rhythm of things. By day 5 to 7, I should have been on a bike or a treadmill, trying an exercise tolerance test, trying to see where my heart rate, I always do this, but where my heart rate was at, where my symptoms would have flared, so that I could go 80 to 90% of that and start recovering my autonomic tolerance, start recovering my exercise tolerance, so that my brain blood flow is okay, so that my CO2 tolerance is okay, so that my blood pressure regulation is okay, so that I can get back on the ice. By day 5 to 7, I should not be returning to play. The NCAA protocol is the BRAIN protocol, so BRAIN, bike, run, agility, in yellow, meaning non-contact, and no restrictions. This whole process, that whole BRAIN process, should take, and I don't think it takes this in the NCAA, but it should take at least 30 days. Most athletes return to play when we do exertion protocols or when we do all this testing. Most athletes return to play within 39 to 60 days. You're looking at least a month, maybe 2 months before complete safe recovery. The reason that we want to say at least 30 days is because metabolic recovery of your brain, so that energy deficit, that mitochondrial dysfunction, takes at least 22 to 33, maybe longer, but 22 to 33 days to recover. So you're looking at least 3, ideally 4 weeks, just to be safe, of minimum recovery before you can assume that you could metabolically take another hit, and it'd be like starting from zero. So do not, did I say do not yet? Do not ever use symptoms as a proxy for return to play. And I see this again. I saw one of the kids I was seeing last week was allowed, the doctor said, hey, your symptoms are gone. It was 11 days after his hit. He was a soccer player. It was 11 days after his hit. Your symptoms are gone. So you're clear to go. You're returned to play. He signed the papers, told the coaches you're good to go. That kid went out and sustained a concussion that same weekend. And now he's 3 years later. And we're still dealing with symptoms. We're not anymore, but we were dealing with symptoms 3 years later. So do not use symptoms as a proxy for return to play. If your doctor says return to play is fine at 10 to 14 days because symptoms are gone, but they have no exam findings, they have nothing to kind of prove that, hey, you were here after concussion and now you're here. And they've done nothing. If you're an athlete and that doctor has done nothing in the way of aerobic, anaerobic resistance training in a monitored fashion, like they've seen you, they've been checking things, that doctor's sadly misinformed in their return to play recommendations. And they're honestly putting you in a dangerous position. One of the things, as an example, is if you look at just the neurocognitive marker of reaction time, reaction time can be messed up for up to 60 days after a concussion. So without proper prescribed exercise, we're looking at deconditioning. So if they're like, hey, rest until your symptoms go away, your symptoms went away, you were deconditioning. We don't know anything about your neurocognitive marker of reaction time. So now you're symptom free, but you're deconditioned and you're possibly returning. You're definitely returning within a window. Reaction time can be delayed for like 21 to 59 days. If you're returning at 11 days, you're definitely within this window of delayed reaction time. You're definitely within the window of metabolic deficit. You've definitely deconditioned. And here we go. Let's go. Let's return to play because you're symptom free. That just doesn't make sense. That's just not safe. Don't do it. If you're an athlete, if you're a parent, if you're a coach listening to this, don't allow your players to return. As much as it would mean the world to them to play, as much as it meant the world to me to play, your brain is just too important. You use it for the rest of your life. Hockey is temporary, even if you go pro. So take it seriously. Recap: concussions happen. There are signs. There's red flags to look out for. Most cases don't require imaging, but those red flags are good to know about for the cases that do. Do not use symptoms as a marker for recovery. Symptoms don't tell you anything about your recovery. Symptoms will peak in 5 to 7 days, and most people will go away within 7 to 10 days. But again, your metabolism doesn't recover for 21, 30, 40 days. And if you're not reconditioning yourself, if you're not working on, like sports performance return to play stuff, and you don't have ways to track it, you don't know what you're returning at. You could be returning below your baseline, at your baseline, but we need to make sure you're at least at your baseline. And if you don't measure, you don't know. So have a doc on board that understands exercise, visual spatial awareness, reaction time, these neurocognitive markers that are important in making return to play decisions. And from a fellow hockey player with several concussions in his history, please take care of your noggins. I appreciate all of you. I hope that wasn't too rambly. I just kind of wanted to run you through the important things to recognize, things that you could ask, things to know about recovery, that symptoms are just, they don't cut it. Even the NCAA requires biking, then running, then agility work, then your non-contact, then your allowed contact. So if you're just going deconditioning, hey, my symptoms went away, and then jumping back in the sport, you missed a huge window for improvement in your recovery. So thank you for everyone who jumped on board. Appreciate all of you. Cover 3.